My guest today is Sarah Dawkins. She has been an interest. Oh, well, she's been on an interesting journey. She's still going through that journey, and the journey is related to health. And I'm interested to have this conversation with her. Obviously, having gone through some challenges in my own life when it comes to health and broken bones and bits and pieces. Sarah is somebody who has been a registered nurse for many years, had some medical issues of her own, couldn't find the solutions in the medical community, and so found alternatives. She's now stopped being a registered nurse, she's deregistered, and she's supporting people in finding the right alternatives for them for different ailments and conditions. And I guess that's one of the things that interests me the most, because perception is one of the 12 chains. And going from being a registered medical professional to now providing support and guidance on alternatives to traditional medicine, it's going to be an interesting conversation. Sarah, thank you for joining me today. I've given a brief introduction there, but I can't really do it justice. The fact that I think you said it's 20 years that you were a registered nurse, and now you've completely left that behind. And almost, I get for me, I'm going to just give my sense on it. You've turned your back on the traditional medical community in favor of, what you may class as new medicine or the alternatives, because that's what's worked for you. Talk me through that. What happened?
Before I share my story, can I just elaborate on one aspect? As much as I do the natural health and wellness, I do believe medicine has a place. And my father was rushed into hospital with pneumonia, pleurisy, and sepsis 8 years ago. So because of medicine, he is still alive. So I think medicine has a place for emergencies and trauma. But I think outside of that, there's so much we can do for ourselves. So my journey started a long time ago, and I was in my, I was 21, and I started with two big red patches of psoriasis on my legs. And I was still in the medical model then, so I used steroid cream all the time, knowing that it was thinning my skin, but it was relieving, it was getting rid of the psoriasis. But the thing with pharmaceuticals is it doesn't treat the underlying cause, the root cause of why we develop symptoms and disease. And at that time, I hadn't got that awareness. So I was using the cream. And one summer, I lived in Eastbourne on the south coast of the UK at the time. And one summer, I thought, I'm done with this now. I've been using this forever. So I just stopped using it, wore shorts, got my legs out in the sun, did lots of walking. And by the end of the summer, the psoriasis had gone. So I'd healed that, my body had healed that, but I didn't understand how pivotal that was at the time. It was just like, great, I don't need to use steroid cream anymore. Fast forward another few years, and I had eczema and acid reflux. And again, I'd been on the traditional medical model, pharmaceuticals. And again, all I'm doing is suppressing the symptoms. It's not about healing when we're on pharmaceuticals. It's about symptom suppression. And it was in 2005, somebody questioned me. At that time, we'd moved to America forever. Somebody questioned something I'd said about what I was doing at home with regard to medication. And and my own body being able to heal. So that started my journey on the internet every night, research. And the eczema and the acid reflux were the first conditions that I really started looking at. What was the root cause? How could I heal those? And I found stress played a huge part in it, but also gluten and dairy are renowned for causing eczema and acid reflux. So I changed my diet and cut out gluten and dairy. And I started to do some de-stressing, a lot more walking again, like I did with the psoriasis. And over a period of a couple of months, because obviously it took a while, I'd had these built-in habits and beliefs that pharmaceuticals were the way forwards, and now I'm changing my beliefs. So I was working with my own perception, my own beliefs around changing from what I was raised and brought up with I was 41 when this conversation around own healing happened. So that's a lot of years to undo that perception. And it's so easy to just grab a pill and not change anything to relieve those symptoms. So I started making these small changes, and noticed a big difference in my health. Not only had I healed the eczema and acid reflux, but I actually started to feel better and had more energy. And I'd had conversations with my mum because she was a retired nurse, and she's like, well, yeah, okay, but there's the pharmaceuticals are much quicker. You can just pop a pill and yeah, well, I can, but I'm not treating the root cause. So it was, that was pivotal in me looking at my beliefs. Where did my beliefs around pharmaceuticals come from? My mum. And that's why I too went into being a nurse, because I wanted to help people like my mum did. And once I started seeing that our bodies can heal themselves when we support them, they become more efficient. Because when we get a cut or a bruise, we don't rush for pharmaceuticals. We just go, well, my body will heal that. So why can it not heal anything else? And that was real key into looking at, well, if I can heal this, well, why can I not heal that? So I started then changing my beliefs to support my body, and really believing in the fact that my body does heal, because it heals the smaller stuff. So why can I not heal the bigger stuff? And that whole perception then changed. And then at work, I'm in conflict with, well, I've healed this. So now I'm looking at, we're just cutting bits out of people or putting bits into people and giving them pharmaceuticals, and they're in that medical model. And many, many people were not aware of how the body can heal itself when it's supported. So I started having some conversations with some patients in the hospital that I thought might have been receptive. And it was taken on board, but it was a real, that wasn't the done thing. So I was having this real internal battle with, I know we can heal ourselves, and I'm doing that outside of work. But in work, I'm having to give the pharmaceuticals and help people through the surgery and help them to recover post-operatively. So it was a real battle within myself to do that. And as I progressed further along in my career, I then healed an underactive thyroid, and I burnt out my adrenal glands, and my blood pressure was 80/40 for several years because of what I'd done to my adrenal glands with the stress. And I ended up with a depression with suicidal thoughts. And obviously, knowing that my body heals, I did some more research into what I can do to help myself further. And at that point, I had a real battle with myself, because I'm like, I'm healing myself at home, but I'm supposed to give pharmaceuticals at work, and I can't do this anymore. So I left my job in the hospital and I went out and set up my very first business. I was still a registered nurse, but I did things like medico-legal work, training, mandatory updates for healthcare workers. So I wasn't working in the hospital as a nurse like that, but I still needed my registration to do the work that I was doing. And whilst that felt better, it didn't really fulfill my soul. I didn't feel that I was doing what I truly wanted to do, and that was to help people to help themselves. And I had 2 years literally of having this battle inside of me, because here I am healing, and here I am talking to other people about the medical model. And I always wanted to be a nurse. And I saw my whole career as a nurse, and then retiring as a retired nurse. So now I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. But who am I if I'm not a nurse? And that was such a battle. It took me 2 years to work on that, because I'd had issues in my younger years with self-perception. So here I am again. I don't know who I am if I'm not a nurse. So as I say, 2 year battle. And then one day I just like, that's it. No, I cannot be a nurse anymore because I'm not bought in. I'm helping people to help themselves. So I deregistered as a nurse. And actually, looking back now, that was just over 2 years ago. It wasn't as difficult as I believed it would be to deregister. So now I help people to help themselves with the knowledge of how they will be treated in the medical model, but from their own looking at their own beliefs and perception of healing and how they can support their body and find the root cause of their health problems and then work with that.
Wow, amazing to hear that journey that you've been on, and actually over the period of time that you've been on this journey from, obviously the work that you've done in the medical field as a nurse and then some of the training, and almost hidden in the background doing that learning and testing stuff and seeing what works, and being able to now get to that point where you've, I guess, fully taken a step back from traditional medical industry and you're supporting other people in a different way. A couple of interesting points there that I'd just like to dip into.
Sure.
You mentioned sort of 2-year process. You moved away from being in the hospital and prescribing, but you then sort of, started to do training and other bits and pieces. And it was a 2-year process before you became deregistered. Relationships are one of the chains that I talk about as well. How did that change affect your relationships? I guess the people that you'd worked with previously, friends and family, the conversations that you had with them about the changes that you were making. Talk me through that.
So the people that I worked with were fully bought into the medical model. So when I left, our relationships naturally, there was just natural distance between us. But I found I made new relationships because I would go all over the UK doing training, the mandatory update training. So I met different people along my journey. So I lost some relationships and gained some others. At the time, I was still a registered nurse. So from my mum's point of view, she still saw me as that nurse because I was still registered. So although I changed my role, I actually became an entrepreneur. And the work that I was doing, and I also wrote a handbook for nurses in the recovery room, and published that with IP, and won a local and then a national award for being an entrepreneur. So I was still a nurse, but I was now a nurse entrepreneur. So my relationships were changing, but I was still wearing that nurse's hat. Although I wasn't treating myself within the medical model, I was still in that nurse's hat, and that it was like a step in the right direction because it took me out of the hospital. I did a little bit of agency work just to fill in, but my work was predominantly training and medical legal work at home. So relationships were changing, but I hadn't fully stepped into the role that I'm as now as a holistic health coach.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love these conversations just to hear about the experiences that people have been through. Sometimes it is, relationships, as you said, naturally part ways. Other times it's like it was a real struggle. Parents didn't accept me and the changes that I wanted to, and so I love these types of conversations to hear about people's journeys. Something else that I wanted to ask you about. So you mentioned the acid reflux and things like that, and cutting out the gluten and the lactose. How was that process for you? How easy did you find that? And I ask because I did an intolerance test, and for me, it's like glucose, it's gluten, lactose, eggs, pineapple. I've got a list of like 64 million different things that I'm meant to cut out. And I'm just like, that just means I eat lettuce leaves. Great. Okay. That's really useful. So I pick and choose as and when I want to cut stuff out. And I know that's probably not doing me any favors because I love a piece of cake. A lot of my creativity comes from going to a coffee shop and having a coffee and a piece of cake. Oh, guess what? Coffee's got milk in it. Okay, well, there's my lactose. Oh, cake. Well, that's got gluten in it. And it's like, oh, okay. So I'm interested to just hear how you went through that process, how you found it. I know there are lots of foods that are now available depending on where you are in the world that, are free from certain things. But just talk me through that process and experience.
So 20 years ago, when I started my journey to de-gluten and de-lactose my life, it was a lot more challenging because there was very little foods about then. So there's a lot more now, but actually I'm big on eating as well as I can. And when I've looked at the food products that are gluten-free and dairy-free, there's an awful lot of artificial ingredients in them, and the ingredients list is as long as your arm sometimes. So I found, for me personally, I love to create in the kitchen, and I found I can change wheat flour for chickpea flour. I found that from a Polish gentleman, and I love the flavour and the texture. So changing that wasn't a problem, and I now make wraps. Rather than have sandwiches, I'll make a wrap with chickpea flour and cassava, which is tapioca starch. And it's really simple. Make a pancake batter mixture and fry it in a pan, whether you use a bit of oil or dry fry it. So that's really easy to do. Coffee, went straight to black, and I enjoy that now. So there are ways and means, but it is a process, and especially the gluten. When you start looking at sources, and things like English mustard contain gluten, and you would never consider that. But the flip side, because I also did a test around 20 years ago as well, the flip side of that is that our DNA might say that we can tolerate gluten or we can tolerate lactose, but we might have had an infection that's affected our bowel and our absorption. So it might be that we, although our test says we can eat it, when we eat it, we get symptoms. So I'm big on symptoms. What symptoms is your body showing you? And if you have symptoms when you eat something, when you drink something, when you do something, when you have an emotion, what is underpinning that? But the other side of that as well is that gluten and lactose are known to cause inflammation in the body, and inflammation is the root cause of pain and disease. So we're not really doing ourselves any favour by eating gluten and lactose. But then from our journeys, if you're trying to cut them out together, I mean, it's huge and it can be overwhelming. So my advice to anybody would be to take baby steps, commit to doing something and do it every day for 30 days and build it into a habit. Just do one thing at a time, because there is so much that we can do. And when we look at that bigger picture, it really is massive. So just choose one thing and take the baby steps to do that, because a little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you said the 30 days there for building that habit, and I guess it is again, it's being conscious of how we're using our in this case it's our money for what we're buying for food or what we're making, and then what we're choosing to put into our mouth and into our body, and just being conscious of that and intentional of, am I giving in and saying this is the easy option? I know it was probably do me a disservice, but it looks like a fantastic sandwich or piece of cake or anything else. Or am I actually going to say, I may need to just pause 2 paces here and be like, I've set myself, I want to feel better. I need to go through this process. I need to build this habit and see what happens and actually commit to that. So yeah, it's a challenge for me. I cut out gluten for a while and I was like, I feel really restricted now. So I need to get sort of back onto that wagon and say, okay, yeah, I need to commit to this and try it and do it properly and see how I can find some alternatives for that.
And it can be restrictive as well. But the other flip side of that is I have a sweet tooth. I have a really sweet tooth. And there are times when I crave the sugar. So it's about looking at alternatives. And I'm a big proponent, if you don't buy it in, it's not there for you to reach for and grab it and then cause you the symptoms. So for me, medjool dates, I have a packet in the fridge. So if I've got a sweet craving, I can just have a medjool date. And the other day I had a really sweet craving and I'd run out of dates. So I put a teaspoon of peanut butter, which was just literally peanuts blended, a teaspoon of cacao powder, raw cacao, which is full of nutrients, and a tablespoon of maple syrup. I mixed all that up, and guess what? I've got my own marathon, or Snickers bar as it's called now. But it's healthy because it's all natural ingredients. So it's about understanding what alternatives you have got, and it's not about depriving yourself. It's just about nourishing your body. Because I don't know about you, when I eat gluten, I get awful distension and abdominal bloating. And when I eat dairy, it causes me some eczema at times, but an acid reflux. So, and sometimes I'll have joint pains with it as well. So when I focus on what will happen in my body when I eat that, the pain and the discomfort helps reinforce the fact that I don't want to feel like that. And plus which, gluten takes 6 weeks for your body to reduce that inflammation and metabolize it out and heal the effects of it. So that's, for one sandwich, 6 weeks is a long time to undo the inflammation. So if you think about the pain rather than the instant gratification, and look at what are your alternatives. But that said, if you're going to eat something, a sandwich or a brownie or a piece of cake, totally eat it, totally be present with it and enjoy it for what it is, and don't beat yourself up about it. Yeah. That is really key, because we all err, we're all human. So just be present with what it is that you're eating and really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I put my joint pains down to rugby injuries most of the time. But again, it's interesting that other things could be having an impact. And the key point there that actually now makes me assess things differently, that's 6 weeks. So even if I was to say, I'll have a sandwich now and I'll not have anything for 4 weeks and then I'll slip, well, actually, I've not done myself any favors there in that 4 weeks, because I've not reached that 6 week point where it's actually the first sandwich has worked its way out in terms of the impact and the potential inflammation. So that's now something for me to think about that says, actually, if I start a process and then slip, all of the work will be for nothing, because I'll just potentially re-inflame parts of my body, and it just becomes that vicious cycle. So yeah, certainly some interesting things for me to think about. I want to take a slightly different line of thought now. You mentioned you've written a book, you are supporting and coaching people, you're now an entrepreneur, you've won some awards. Talk me through that process as well, and that experience, because some of the things that I help people with is breaking free is that move from being in the 9 to 5 in the traditional sort of corporate world and saying, you know what, I want to have more freedom and I want to build something myself. So just talk me through your experience of doing that. So, some of the things that you had to go through, the challenges that you overcame, because I love to share these sorts of stories with the audience.
Right. So my book started as I started healing the depression with suicidal thoughts and my thyroid and my adrenals. So I don't know if you've come across Charlotte Gerson from the Gerson Institute. She basically says, healing is healing. You can't heal 2 diseases and keep one. So when we're supporting our body to heal, we're healing everything. So as I was healing the depression, suicidal thoughts, my adrenals, my thyroid, I started to write about it, what I'd done, how I'd started healing. But I wasn't sure where my book was going. I knew I wanted to help people with my own journey. And once I'd written my own journey, for me, it wasn't worthy, it wasn't good enough. So I put it away on my computer and it stayed there for another 5 years. In the interim, I then left my job in the hospital, and I just completed a master's degree at the university. And one of the teachers from my master's degree said, why don't you join the university entrepreneurship scheme and set up a business and be an entrepreneur? I'm like, well, we'll give it a go, because through the university, through my master's degree, that's how I'd written the booklet that I'd written, that there wasn't any locally or nationally for nurses to do what we were doing. So I wrote that program. So that's how I became an entrepreneur. And the group helped me to learn business insurance and what business was all about. And so I was doing those classes every week. And then they did a showcase reel, and one of the tutors came to me and said, I'd really like you to showcase your business. And I went, okay, does that mean standing talking to people? She went, yes. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can. Because public speaking was really not high on my priority list. Anyway, I had to write this PowerPoint, like, what on earth is PowerPoint? I mean, I'm going back some. And then I had to stand and give a presentation in front of the whole of the group, plus some local business leaders. So I was like deer in the headlights, looking at my slides, reading from my slides, because I had no idea and I was petrified. And I won an award at the end of that session for company to watch, because the business people who were there giving the award said I'd made something from nothing, because there wasn't what I'd written, and I'd written one based on research. So that was wonderful. And then about a month later, one of the tutors from the entrepreneurship group said, Sarah, I'd like you to apply for this National Freelancers Day in London to choose a freelancer from the UK for first, second and third prizes. I'm like, oh, local awards one thing, national's a bit, I'm just Sarah, who am I really? So she said, no, I want you to apply for it. So anyway, I did the application, sent it off, and never thought anything about it, because I just didn't think it'd go anywhere. And I got a reply back, you've been chosen as one of the 15 top entrepreneurs in the UK. And I'm like, oh, I've got goosebumps. And can you come to London on this date? And we're going to pick the first, second and third winners. I'm like, oh, London. So anyway, I went down to London, and I was stood on stage with the other 14 entrepreneurs. I'm thinking, what an amazing opportunity being the top 15 entrepreneurs in the UK. Well, I came second. Out of all of these entrepreneurs that had applied for this National Freelancers Day, and I was just absolutely blown away. And that, to me, then I'm like, so I am really somebody now. I've really, I've got 2 awards now. I'm clearly an entrepreneur. I've done something worthwhile, and that it was nice. It was a great feeling, but it didn't take me forwards in my business. I was still doing the same things that I was previously, and I stayed with that business for a few years, just because it was different. I had lots of different hats that I wore, and I enjoyed all the variety of work, but I was still a registered nurse. And a few years down the line, I woke up one day with the notion that my book has to be finished. And I thought, right, I've got to reach out to other people. It's not just my story, it's other people's healing. So that when people read it, they can see people have healed from a whole range of different things. Whilst I had lots of health problems, I didn't have enough to write a book about lots. So 74 people came back to me healing multiple sclerosis, motor neurone, allergies, autoimmune, cancer, Lyme, so many different things. They all wrote their own journey, how they healed, what they had, what their symptoms were, what they did on their own healing journey. And I collated them all into a book and entered Hay House, because it had a book opportunity for publishing. I entered their competition and didn't come anywhere. So me being me, I thought, right, that's the message, that my book can't wait the 18 months for Hay House to publish it. It needs to get out now. So I self-published it on Amazon, and it's mine and other people's stories. And the rationale for that was Joe Dispenza says, to change our limiting beliefs, I'll just paraphrase it, to change our limiting beliefs, we only have to see one person doing what we thought was impossible. So here's 75 of us healing things that doctors say we can't heal without pharmaceuticals, or we just can't heal, period. And we're all healing, and we've all healed those ailments and conditions and symptoms. So my book is to help people to not only understand that they can heal things doctors say they can't, but also to share with them what other people have done and how other people have healed on their own journeys.
Wow. I mean, just the variety of, sort of ailments that you listed there, I guess that almost should become any issue you've got, come and read the book, because chances are you'll find, a story or a chapter that says, oh, if you've got this, okay, here's one way. And I guess that's also the important part is you mentioned it there. All it takes is for us to see or to hear one person being able to do it. Okay, they've done it in a way that's worked for them, but at least it gives everybody else something to try, rather than having no reference point and feeling, frustrated, or, sometimes it can lead to depression if you've got something that you feel like, okay, it's incurable, or I've got no support for this or anything else. So I guess, having it as that stake in the ground to say, look, there are other people who have been in a similar position. They've been able to make some changes. And I guess actually that leads through from health into anything. Entrepreneurship, exactly the same. If you see people who have been able to do what it is that you want to do and have been able to get to a point, I guess it gives you that confidence to say, it is possible. Okay, my path and journey may be different. It may take me longer. I may have different ups and downs and twists and turns, but look, okay, there's somebody who has demonstrated already that it is possible.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just a regular person, if you will. I'm nobody special. I certainly wasn't born with every opportunity available in front of me. I've had to work to get to where I've got to. But I think if you've got that want to do it, that desire and that belief that you can do it, or at least give it a try, it really propels you forwards.
Fantastic. Okay, we've touched on the health and the medical stuff. We've touched on a little bit on the entrepreneurship stuff. If I was to ask you, what 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone? And it can be health related or entrepreneurship related. What would you say to them?
First and foremost, assess your beliefs. Because until we become conscious of what we believe, it sits in our subconscious and it runs our life. So, like me, I believed in medicine. I believed in hospitals. I believed in doctors. That was all I believed in because that's how I was raised. And never questioned it, never thought to question it until somebody questioned me. And then it became conscious. So, when you're triggered, identify what it is underneath the trigger that's triggered you. When you have a strong belief about something, identify what it is about that belief. Where has it come from? Is it really yours? Is that what you really believe? So really drill down into your own beliefs. Stress is a massive cause of disease. It causes a whole range of symptoms from minor to major. So identify stressful points in your life and then look at what your beliefs are around that. Why is that stressful to me? Because for most of the time, it's our perception about what's happening, that situation, that causes us the stress. It's our beliefs around that. So again, identify the stress and identify the belief that goes with it. And can you change those beliefs to make that situation or what somebody said or what's happening? Can you identify ways to make it feel less stressful by changing your perception of it? And the third belief is we can get stuck in our story. And for me, when I started with the depression, I was totally a victim to it. I was in it and look what's happened to me and poor me and it's not fair and I'm the victim in this. And we can get stuck in that and we can live in that because I did. But it's about understanding the story that we're telling ourselves. Is that story really true? Is it serving me? What am I benefiting from telling myself that story? But also, what am I losing from telling myself that story? So find a way to reframe what's happened, look for the good and what you can build on. So I stopped being the victim in that depression and I looked at it as, right, I can use this as a stepping stone now to change my life and step out of what I was doing into something new. And that's where I was when I left nursing. and stepped into being an entrepreneur. I used it as a stepping stone. So what can you change within your life to help you to change your story? Or what new story can you start telling about yourself to move you forwards and propel you into a life that you maybe want, or to do something that you want? You know, what would you like to do if you were able to, and start making steps towards doing that?